Germany's pork exports to China had been booming. That is, until the CCP virus hit Europe's biggest meat processing plant. NTD's Berlin correspondent Christian Watson has the details.
Europe's biggest slaughterhouse in northwest Germany has reopened. 1 month ago, authorities shut the plant down after 1,400 employees tested positive for the CCP virus. The plant's operator, Tönnies Group, Germany's biggest meat processor, was widely criticized for its poor working conditions and hygiene measures. Amid declining pork consumption in Germany, pork exports to China have become increasingly important to German producers. Despite the impact of the pandemic on international trade, in the first 4 months of 2020, German pork exports to China doubled in size and tripled in value compared to 2019. In April, 1/3 of all German pork exports went to China. Since the 2018 outbreak of swine fever in China, demand for foreign pork in China has exploded, and prices along with it. China has lost half of its 440 million pigs and now imports 40% of all pork globally. Tönnies, China's biggest partner in the EU, has especially benefited from the boom. 20% of its revenue now comes from Asian sales. The CCP virus outbreak at its plant in June dealt a heavy blow to this business. China stopped all imports from the company, fearing transmission of the virus. Tönnies had big plans in China, including a joint venture with China's Decon Group to build a pork processing plant in Sichuan province. It would be Tönnies' first plant outside of Europe. The total investment is more than $500 million. The slaughterhouse would eventually be able to butcher up to 6 million pigs per year. It's unclear whether the deal is still on track. Reporting by Christian Watson, NTD News, Berlin.
U.S. Attorney General William Barr asks American people and companies to stand together and resist the Chinese Communist Party's attempts at more influence. 80% of U.S. economic espionage cases link back to the benefit of the Chinese state. Barr says the regime uses a number of predatory and illegal tactics to try to dominate and infiltrate America and ultimately try to replace it as the world superpower.
U.S. Attorney General William Barr expressed a sense of urgency for the American people and companies to stand together and secure Americans' freedoms and prosperity. Barr points out countless espionage, coercion, and censorship the Chinese Communist Party has forced upon American soil.
A world marching to the beat of the Communist Chinese drum will not be a hospitable one for institutions that depend on free markets, free trade, or the free exchange of ideas.
For years, the communist regime has undermined America's free market system. One example, America's dependence on China for medical goods, which led to endangering lives during the virus pandemic.
The PRC hoarded the masks for itself, blocking producers, including American companies, from exporting them to other countries that needed it.
But it doesn't stop there. The CCP's influence on America's free market system stretches back even further. The U.S. used to be the world's largest rare earth producer, but since the 1980s, the Chinese Communist Party has infiltrated and dominated that industry. It comes at what Barr calls a dangerous risk of dependence, since America relies on China for about 80% of all imports.
Is America's top supplier, accounting for about 80% of our imports. The risk of dependence are real.
Along with the Communist Party's economic handle, Barr also points out the regime's censorship in entertainment, especially Hollywood. One of many examples is found in an American film, World War Z. The zombie movie's original plot included a virus that started in China, but the director had to cut that part out in hopes of stretching into China's market. And Barr says the Communist Party is censoring ordinary American citizens in everyday life, too.
Hollywood is far from alone in kowtowing to the PRC. America's big tech companies have also allowed themselves to become pawns of Chinese influence.
He encourages American people and companies to reevaluate their relationship with China, because he says no one should underestimate the ingenuity of China. Barr says the fundamental character of the regime has never changed and isn't any closer to democracy now than it was during the Tiananmen Square massacre. Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
While flooding continues to wreak havoc on southern China, Chinese media outlets are pushing propaganda. Their reports only focus in on positive developments, like quick emergency response times and beautiful scenery, without covering the devastation. NTD's Juliet Song reports.
China is grappling with its worst flooding in decades. So far, almost 90% of China's provinces have been affected, while over 2 million people have been forced to abandon their homes. But Chinese media outlets seem to be beautifying the disaster and toning down the devastation. In Jiangxi province, one of the worst hit by the floods, a resident previously told us that the situation there is really dire.
We're in a very miserable situation. The embankments have burst and water is overflowing.
Others are trapped in their homes without basic supplies.
Now I don't have any food to eat. I don't even have any rice at home. What should I do?
Both residents live near China's biggest freshwater lake, Poyang, and have suffered from its flooding. The day the lake's water level exceeded its flood warning level, state-run media Xinhua News Agency posted a video online. In it, the outlet said as the lake's water continues to climb, parts of the road have been submerged, adding that the most beautiful road above water emerged as a result. In early July, when Wuhan was hit by heavy rain and flooding, state media posted an article praising the city's scenery after the rain. One Chinese internet user wrote an article to express his shock at the media's attempts to put a positive spin on the disaster reports. He wrote, "Our mainstream media is trying to create a beautiful world for us. In this world, the flood didn't damage any roads, crush any bridges or homes, or wash away any cars." A Hebei resident said he thinks it's one of the Chinese media's characteristics. We've distorted his voice to protect his identity.
They can put a so-called positive energy spin on anything bad. To use a popular idiom, they can turn a funeral into a joyous occasion.
The Chinese Communist Party uses the phrase positive energy in its propaganda. It means to only focus on the bright side. According to the regime, crises, disasters, and criticizing the Communist Party would be deemed negative energy.
If disaster hits, the propaganda will always focus on the victory and success of emergency management. They won't talk about the suffering.
Mr. Liu said some Chinese people are very annoyed by the propaganda.
But there isn't a way out. Right now, China doesn't have freedom of speech. Many people who work in the media may not want to send out the propaganda, but they have to because it's required by the regime.
In 2017, Chinese leader Xi Jinping said state media outlets should spread and transmit positive energy. Another theme commonly seen in the so-called positive reporting is the use of drone shots. A senior Chinese media professional says they're used for a reason. In the article, he wrote, "Pain doesn't have a place in shots like this. When flooding comes, it destroys homes, drowns pigs or people, and their bodies are left to rot. When the water recedes, it leaves garbage everywhere. These are some pretty bad scenes, but they won't appear in aerial shots." Chin Han and Juliet Song, NTD News.